Hello, everyone. James is here. Welcome again to Easy English Talks podcast. Today, we're going to be taking a deep dive into some seriously helpful strategies for anyone aiming to, conquer the TOEFL in 2025.
Yeah, that's right.
A great TOEFL score, it can be your ticket to studying abroad or landing that dream job in an English-speaking environment.
That's right, James. And here's the thing. It's not just about, being fluent in English.
Right.
It's about understanding how the TOEFL works, how to manage your time, and how to use, clever strategies to really boost your score.
So we're not just learning English, we're learning how to crack the code.
Exactly. And believe me, there are some insider tips and tricks that even native English speakers might find surprising.
Okay, I'm intrigued. But before we get into those secret strategies, let's give our listeners a quick overview of the TOEFL itself. What are we actually dealing with here?
Sure. So the TOEFL is divided into 4 sections: reading, listening, speaking, and writing. The whole thing takes under 2 hours to complete.
Wow, under 2 hours to prove your English skills to the world. Sounds like every second counts.
Absolutely. And that's why time management is so crucial.
Right.
You'll see that theme popping up throughout all of our strategies today.
Got it. So let's start with the reading section. Many people find those long academic passages pretty daunting. How can we make them less intimidating?
Here's a strategy that often surprises people. Don't dive headfirst into the passage.
Right.
Instead, take a moment to skim those questions first. It's like having a treasure map before you start digging for gold.
Okay,
You'll know exactly what to look for.
I like that analogy. So instead of getting lost in the details, we're strategically targeting the information we need.
Precisely. For example, if a question asks about the main idea of the passage, to focus on the introduction and conclusion paragraphs.
So we're using the structure of the passage to our advantage.
Exactly. Now, once you start reading, pay close attention to those topic sentences. They're like mini summaries of each paragraph, giving you a quick snapshot of what each section is about. Think of it like this. If you're reading an article about climate change, the first sentence might lay out the problem, while the last sentence might hint at possible solutions.
So the topic sentences are like signposts, guiding us through the passage. But what about those tricky answer choices?
Yes.
I know the TOEFL is famous for having those almost right options that can really trip you up.
Oh, absolutely. The TOEFL loves to throw in those imposter answers that twist the truth just slightly. For instance, the passage might say most scientists agree on a particular point, but then a wrong answer choice might boldly claim all scientists agree. It's a sneaky way to test your attention to detail.
Definitely sneaky. So it's not enough to understand the passage. We also have to be super careful about how the answer choices are worded.
That's right. It's all about being a sharp reader, noticing those subtle differences, and avoiding those tempting traps.
Okay, so we've got some great strategies for tackling the reading section. But what about the listening section?
Yeah.
It can be pretty challenging to catch everything when you only hear the audio once.
You're absolutely right. There's
Yeah.
no rewinding or pausing allowed, so you have to be fully focused from the moment the audio begins.
Right.
And remember, they're not just testing your ability to understand individual words, they're also testing your ability to understand the speaker's intent, the main idea, and how different ideas connect.
So it's like we need to be listening on multiple levels at the same time.
Exactly. And that's where becoming a note-taking ninja can really help.
Okay.
As you listen, jot down key points, main ideas, and any words or phrases that signal a shift in tone or emphasis.
So our notes are like a roadmap, guiding us through the audio and helping us remember the key information.
Precisely. Now here's another tip. Pay close attention to the speaker's tone of voice. A shift in tone can reveal agreement, disagreement, or emphasis. For example, imagine a student saying, "Oh, great," but their voice drips with sarcasm.
Right.
They probably don't think it's great at all.
That's a great point. Tone of voice can completely change the meaning of what someone is saying. It's like those times when you text someone and they misinterpret your tone because they can't hear your voice.
Exactly. And here's another challenge you might face in the listening section: different accents and speaking styles.
Oh, right.
The TOEFL uses audio recordings from a variety of speakers, so you might hear a lecture with a British accent followed by a conversation with an American accent.
That sounds tricky. How can we prepare for that?
The key is exposure.
Okay.
The more you listen to a variety of English speakers, whether it's watching movies, listening to podcasts, or talking to people from different backgrounds, the better your ear will become as adapting to different accents.
So it's like training our ears to be more flexible and adaptable.
Exactly. It's like going to the gym for your ears. The more you work them out, the stronger they'll become.
Okay, I like that. So we've talked about skimming questions, spotting topic sentences, and becoming note-taking ninjas. Those are some seriously helpful strategies for the reading and listening sections. But what about the speaking section?
Right.
That's where a lot of people get nervous.
I understand. It can be intimidating to speak in a foreign language, especially in a test environment.
Yeah,
But remember, the TOEFL isn't looking for perfection. They want to assess your ability to communicate effectively in English.
that's reassuring to hear.
Yeah.
So what are some practical tips to help us feel more confident and prepared for those speaking tasks?
Well, first and foremost, practice is essential.
Okay.
The more you practice speaking in English, the more comfortable and fluent you'll become. And when you practice, think about the types of prompts you might encounter on the TOEFL.
Right.
For example, you might be asked to describe a familiar place or object, recount a personal experience, or express an opinion on a given topic.
So it's not just about practicing random English conversation. It's about practicing the specific skills the TOEFL is looking for.
Exactly. And when you're practicing, pay attention to your pronunciation, your pace, and your intonation. Are you speaking clearly and understandably? Are you pausing in the right places? Are you varying your tone to keep the listener engaged?
That's like fine-tuning a musical instrument. You're not just hitting the notes, you're making the music sound good.
I love that analogy. Now, another important aspect of the speaking section is structure.
Right.
Remember, you only have a limited amount of time to respond, so it's crucial to organize your thoughts in a logical and coherent way.
So it's not just about what you say, but how you say it.
Precisely. Use transitions like first, second, for example, and in conclusion to guide the listener through your response. This will make your speech flow smoothly and help the examiner follow your train of thought.
It's like giving them a roadmap of your ideas.
Exactly.
Great. So far, we've covered some really useful tips for the reading, listening, and speaking sections of the TOEFL. In the next part of our deep dive, we'll explore the writing section and those integrated tasks where you have to combine multiple skills. Stay tuned.
Welcome back to the second part of our TOEFL deep dive.
We're ready to keep uncovering those strategies that can help you ace the TOEFL.
In the first part, we gave you a general overview of the 4 sections and some powerful tips for tackling the reading and listening sections.
Right. We talked about everything from skimming those questions to becoming note-taking ninjas.
Now, we're going to zoom in on some specific techniques that can really make a difference on test day, starting with those integrated tasks that often make people nervous.
Okay, let's break those down. You mentioned integrated tasks in both the speaking and writing sections. What exactly are we talking about here?
Well, imagine this. You're presented with a reading passage on a particular topic, maybe something about the history of photography, for example. Then you listen to a lecture or conversation that relates to that passage, perhaps a professor discussing different photographic techniques.
So it's like getting information from 2 different sources, one written and one spoken?
Exactly. And then you have to combine those pieces of information to answer a question or write an essay. It's all about connecting the dots and showing that you can synthesize information from multiple sources.
That sounds challenging, but also pretty cool. It's like being a detective, piecing together clues from different places.
I like that analogy. And here's the thing. These integrated tasks are designed to reflect real-life academic situations in university. You'll often be reading textbooks, listening to lectures, and then having to write papers or give presentations based on that combined knowledge.
So it's not just about passing a test, it's about developing skills that will help you succeed in a real academic environment.
Absolutely. Now let's dive into some specific strategies for tackling these integrated tasks. First, when you're reading the passage, make sure you really understand the main idea and any key supporting details. Don't just skim it, take the time to digest the information.
Okay, got it. Read actively and absorb the key points.
Well,
What about the listening portion? Any tips for making sure we catch the important stuff when we can only hear it once?
Well, as we discussed earlier, those note-taking skills are super important here. Jot down key points, dates, names, or anything that stands out to you as you listen. But here's a key strategy for integrated tasks. Focus on how the listening material relates to the reading passage. Does it support, contradict, or elaborate on the information in the text? Listen for those connections.
So we're not just passively listening to the audio, we're actively looking for those links to the reading passage.
Exactly. It's like building a bridge between the 2 sources of information.
I see. And then when it comes to speaking or writing our response, we need to make sure we clearly connect those dots, showing that we've integrated the information from both sources.
Precisely use phrases like, according to the reading, or the speaker stated that.
Yeah.
To explicitly show those connections, this demonstrates to the examiner that you're not just regurgitating information, but you're actively synthesizing it.
That's a great tip. It's like
Whenever.
adding those little labels to our response
Correct.
to show how we're weaving the information together.
Exactly. Now, let's shift gears a bit and talk about some strategies for the speaking section as a whole. One thing that often trips people up is the time limit. You only have a short amount of time to respond to each prompt.
Yeah, I could imagine that being pretty stressful. Any tips for making the most of that limited time?
Absolutely. First, don't waste precious seconds rambling or going off on tangents. Stay focused on the prompt and make sure your response is relevant and well organized. Think of it like this. You're telling a short story. You need a beginning, a middle, and an end.
Okay, so structure is key. Just like a good story, a good TOEFL response needs a clear narrative arc.
Exactly. Now, another tip is to use transitions effectively. Phrases like first, second, for example, and in conclusion can help you guide the listener through your response and make your ideas flow smoothly.
It's like giving them a roadmap of your thoughts.
Precisely. And one last tip for the speaking section. Don't be afraid to be yourself. Let your personality shine through. Of course, you want to be clear and professional, but you don't need to sound like a robot. A little bit of warmth and natural expression can go a long way.
That's great advice. It's like we're having a conversation with a friend, not delivering a stiff, formal presentation.
Exactly. Relax, be yourself, and let your English skills shine through. Remember, the examiners are looking for effective communication, not robotic perfection.
All right, those are some fantastic tips for the speaking section. Now, what about the writing section? What are some key things to keep in mind when we're crafting those essays?
Well, first and foremost, remember those good writing habits you've probably learned in your English classes. Clear and concise language, well-structured paragraphs, strong topic sentences, and a logical flow of ideas. Those are all essential for a good TOEFL essay.
So it's really about applying those fundamental writing principles to the specific context of the TOEFL.
Exactly. And just like in the speaking section, time management is crucial in the writing section. Don't spend too long brainstorming or perfecting your first paragraph. Make sure you allocate enough time to develop all of your ideas and proofread your work before you hit that submit button.
Makes sense. We don't want to run out of time before we've had a chance to fully flesh out our brilliant thoughts.
Right now, let's talk about some strategies for those two specific writing tasks. Remember, you'll have one integrated task and one independent task.
Okay, let's start with the integrated task. We already talked about some general strategies for integrating information from the reading and listening passages. But what about the actual writing process? Any tips for crafting a clear and coherent essay?
Well, first, make sure you have a clear understanding of the prompt. What exactly are they asking you to do? Are you summarizing the main points of both passages? Are you comparing and contrasting the information? Are you analyzing the speaker's opinion? Make sure you know exactly what's expected of you.
Got it. Read the prompt carefully and make sure we're answering the right question.
Exactly. Now, once you've analyzed the prompt, it's time to plan your essay. Just like in the speaking section, having a clear structure will help you stay focused and organized. Think about the main points you want to make and how you'll support those points with evidence from the passages.
So it's like creating a roadmap for our essay, guiding the reader through our thoughts and arguments.
Exactly. And remember, you don't need to write a novel focus on quality over quantity. A well-organized, well-supported essay of 300 words will be much more impressive than a rambling, unfocused essay of 500 words.
Okay, that makes sense. Keep it concise and to the point.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Now let's talk about the independent task. This one gives you a little more freedom to express your own opinions and ideas.
So this is where we get to show off our persuasive writing skills.
Exactly. But remember, even though it's an independent task, it's still important to support your arguments with evidence, and examples don't just state your opinion without backing it up.
Got it. No unsupported claims. We need to provide those reasons and examples to make our arguments convincing.
Right, think of it like this. You're a lawyer presenting a case to a jury. You need to present your evidence clearly and persuasively to win them over.
Okay, I like that analogy. It makes the writing process feel more dynamic and engaging.
Exactly. Now, one final tip for both the integrated and independent tasks, proofread carefully before you submit. It's amazing how many small errors you can catch with a fresh pair of eyes.
Oh, absolutely. Typos and grammatical errors can really detract from an otherwise strong essay. It's like wearing a beautifully tailored suit with a big ketchup stain on the front.
I love that analogy. It's so true. So take a few minutes to read through your essays carefully, looking for any errors in grammar, spelling, punctuation, or word
It's
choice.
like giving our essays that final polish before we send them out into the world.
Exactly. Now remember, both the speaking and writing sections are ultimately about demonstrating your ability to communicate effectively in English. So relax, be confident, and let your personality and your language skills shine through.
Great advice. Okay, we've covered a lot of ground today, from skimming questions to using transitions to proofreading carefully. I feel like we've unlocked some seriously powerful strategies for tackling the TOEFL.
Me too, James. Remember, success on the TOEFL isn't about luck. It's about preparation, practice, and perseverance. So keep studying, stay focused, and don't be afraid to ask for help along the way. You got this.
Great words of encouragement. And for our listeners out there, we'll be back with part 3, where we'll delve even deeper into some specific techniques and tips for each section of the TOEFL. Stay tuned. Welcome back to the final part of our TOEFL deep dive.
We're excited to wrap things up with some powerful strategies that can help you boost your score on test day.
In the previous parts, we explored a range of tips and techniques, from understanding the structure of the test to becoming note-taking ninjas.
We even delved into the art of integrating information from multiple sources and structuring your responses effectively.
Now we're going to focus on some specific areas that often trip people up, those little details that can make a big difference in your overall score.
And we'll share some insider secrets that can give you an edge in the competition.
Okay, I'm ready for those insider secrets. Let's start with vocabulary. I know that having a strong vocabulary is essential for any English test. But how can we make sure we're using the right vocabulary on the TOEFL?
That's a great question, James. You're absolutely right that vocabulary is crucial, but it's not just about using big fancy words. It's about using the right words in the right context and using them accurately.
So it's not about showing off our vocabulary, it's about using it effectively to communicate our ideas clearly.
Exactly. And remember, the TOEFL is an academic test, so you'll want to focus on building your academic vocabulary. This includes words related to science, history, literature, and other academic disciplines.
Okay, that makes sense. But how do we actually go about building our academic vocabulary? Do we just need to memorize a giant list of words?
Well, memorizing lists can be helpful, but it's not the most effective way to learn vocabulary. The best way to learn new words is to encounter them in context. So read academic articles, listen to lectures, and pay attention to how words are used in different settings.
So it's like learning by osmosis. We absorb new words as we engage with real-world academic materials.
Precisely. And don't just passively read or listen when you encounter a new word. Look it up, write it down, and try to use it in your own speaking and writing. The more you actively engage with new vocabulary, the better you'll remember it.
So it's all about active learning, not just passive memorization.
Exactly. Now, here's another tip for building your TOEFL vocabulary. Pay attention to collocations. Collocations are words that often go together, like strong evidence or conduct research. Learning these common word pairings can help you sound more natural and fluent.
So it's not just about knowing individual words, it's about knowing how those words combine with other words to create meaning.
Precisely. Now let's talk about another area that often causes trouble for TOEFL test takers, grammar. I know grammar can be a bit dry, but it's essential for clear and effective communication.
I agree, and I know the TOEFL examiners are looking for those grammar skills in all 4 sections of the test.
You're absolutely right. So what are some common grammar mistakes that we should be aware of?
Well, one that I always struggle with is subject-verb agreement, making sure the verb matches the subject of the sentence.
Ah, yes, a classic. It's a simple rule, but it's easy to make mistakes, especially when you're under pressure. Remember, singular subjects take singular verbs, and plural subjects take plural verbs.
Okay, got it. Singular with singular, plural with plural. What about other common grammar traps?
Another common one is using the wrong tense. Make sure you're using the present tense, past tense, or future tense appropriately.
Okay, tenses can be tricky. Any tips for making sure we're using the right one?
Well, think about the time frame of the action you're describing. Is it happening now? Did it happen in the past? Will it happen in the future? Once you've established the time form, choose the tense that accurately reflects that time frame.
Okay, that makes sense. Time frame equals tense. What about articles? I know articles can be tricky for English learners.
You're right, articles can be confusing. Remember, a and n are used before singular nouns, while the is used before specific nouns or nouns that have already been mentioned.
Got it. Singular nouns get a or an, and specific or previously mentioned nouns get the.
Exactly. Now, here's a bonus tip for all 4 sections of the TOEFL. Pay attention to your pronunciation. Clear and understandable pronunciation is essential for effective communication.
That's a great point. We can have all the right vocabulary and grammar, but if our pronunciation is unclear, our message might get lost.
Exactly. So practice speaking clearly and enunciating your words. Listen to native English speakers and try to imitate their pronunciation. And don't be afraid to ask for feedback from a teacher or tutor.
Okay, so pronunciation is key, and I guess that applies to both the speaking and listening sections, right?
You get in the speaking section, you want to make sure the examiners can understand what you're saying. And in the listening section, you want to be able to decipher different accents and speaking styles.
Makes sense. So we've covered a lot of ground today, from vocabulary and grammar to pronunciation, and those all-important integrated tasks. Any final words of wisdom for our listeners before we wrap up our TOEFL deep dive?
Just this, remember that the TOEFL is a test of your English skills, but it's also a test of your resilience, your determination, and your ability to perform under pressure. So prepare well, practice consistently, and believe in yourself. You got this.
Great advice, and remember the TOEFL is just one step on your journey to achieving your academic or professional goals. Don't let it define you or limit your dreams. Embrace the challenge, stay positive, and keep moving forward.
Well said, James. And on that inspiring note, we'll wrap up this episode of Easy English Talks podcast. Thanks for joining us on this TOEFL deep dive.
Don't forget to subscribe and share the video with your friends. Bye, and see you next time. Bye-bye.